How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 3 of What If Deku Had Sunshine. And now, let's begin. Hey, Izuku, if you don't mind me asking, what's your quirk? Everyone else on this bus and in our class, their quirks are quite easy to tell what they are. However, I've just not been able to guess what yours is. So, do you mind explaining it to us what it is? Izuku would look down for a moment as if he was thinking before answering. It's quite the long story, and I don't think we have time to explain it all on this bus ride. However, I'll give you a brief story of it. I got this quirk from my father, and he's been training me all my life how to use it correctly. I also have had this axe ever since I was around 12 or so when I was strong enough to wield it, as it's insanely heavy. I'd actually predict many of you wouldn't even be able to, lift it up at least a centimeter off the ground. That's how heavy it is. As some of the class would just nod their heads in agreement, while some of them would boast saying, "Oh, please, your axe looks light as a feather. I think I could lift it with just my pinky finger," which was them just being cocky, hoping to please a girl or so on the bus. Mostly this just being Kaminari, trying to impress some of the girls sitting around him. However, his attempts would just be a failure, as they just didn't mind whatever he said at all. Once the bus would come to a complete stop, Aizawa would direct the entire class outside of the bus, where they would then start walking up these steps towards the entrance of the USJ. There they would meet the rescue hero 13 standing up at the top, who would then explain in further detail what they will be doing inside the massive dome that was right in front of them. Alright, Class 1A, today we're just going to be getting a hang of everything here at the USJ, maybe doing some rescue exercises, and getting used to all different sorts of weather patterns and different areas that you might have to deal with in your life as a hero. So, now we may enter the massive building that is known as the USJ, 13 would exclaim before entering the building by pushing open the massive doors. However, once they would push it open, there waiting for them was an entire army of Nomus. However, they didn't know what those are. This was their first time being used in the world besides the warehouse that they had been trained and stockpiled. As standing in the middle of them was a purple mist type person and a blue-haired person that seemed to have a sort of liking towards hands, having a hand on his face and then all around his upper body. Good morning, UA. I'd like to welcome and introduce you to the Nomu army, of course. These things were specially designed to take you along with All Might and all of the heroes down, so don't expect beating them anytime soon. Many of the heroes in training weren't sure what this was. Was this just a facade as villains? Many of them would look towards Aizawa and 13 for answers, however, they were just speechless. However, Aizawa would jump into action, yelling for 13 to protect the students, as he would then jump down into the massive Nomu army that was in front of him. The mindless creatures would stare on it. Aizawa, who was jumping down towards them, easily punching every single one of them that was in his path, as they had not received any orders yet. However, it seemed like his hopes to destroy the Nomu army with a couple of attacks just seemed to not be working at all. Every time he would punch a Nomu, sending them back, they would easily just get up again. With Aizawa fighting using up most of his energy, he would look on towards the laughing and smirking Shigaraki. "Oh, please, you think a simple punch can just beat a Nomu like that? That's just a sad effort you're putting on. It's merely just wasting your time and energy, delaying the inevitable of your death. So I suggest you just accept it already. These Nomus have special quirks, allowing them for the resistance against physical attacks like yours." As Izuku would see this before stepping up, with his hair covering his eyes, putting a shadow below them. "Alright, you blue-haired freak, I suggest you take your army and leave. I'll give you 5 seconds before I'm forced to tear this entire army to shreds." Shigaraki would laugh like, "Oh, please, look what your teacher's doing. He can barely even lay a scratch on them. You think a simple child would be able to beat them? You must be joking, right?" as Izuku would just not care about all of Shigaraki's answers. However, Shigaraki would turn towards Kurogiri. Kurogiri, please split up that class. It'd actually be quite hard for all of these Nomus to beat them in numbers. It's the whole reason we didn't just make one Super Nomu was for the numbers thing, as we wouldn't want to waste a ton of time making it one Super Nomu that might be defeated by this class. Would rather just have an army that would possibly be spared by them. As Kurogiri would nod, opening up a portal right beneath his class, as Izuku would stare on behind him, as his class would just be consumed by the portal beneath him. Some of his classmates remained, barely being able to dodge out of the way. However, most of his class had just been separated throughout the entire building. Izuku would take that as the last straw, deeming that they weren't planning on escaping anytime soon. So Izuku would jump down, taking his axe from his back before wielding it in his hand. He would launch back down, slicing the Nomus clean in two, as all of them would continue on charging right at Izuku. The massive army and horde would just be rushing towards Izuku by command of Shigaraki. However, their attempts seemed to be just not working at all, much like Aizawa's had. Aizawa had been thrown back by a punch and was now staring on as Izuku was cleanly cutting through all of these Nomus as they weren't able to regenerate. As Shigaraki had mentioned prior, also about the resistance, that they had a minor regeneration quirk, so with that, many of them would just get cuts, but they would regenerate, causing for many scars along their body. However, this was nothing to the scale of the Nomu that we saw in canon My Hero Academia, so with Izuku cleanly slicing them in half, Shigaraki was just in shock. Not only were the Nomus not healing at all, they just completely died on impact. Izuku's cuts shouldn't have been able to get through them. They've tested it with a normal katana, and it wasn't able to even cut through the skin. So how sharp must Izuku's blade have been? And it showed how strong Izuku was wielding his axe, tearing through the Nomu army with ease. However, there was one standing in their way. It was the most powerful of all, and it was around half the strength of the Nomu that was in canon My Hero Academia. However, Izuku was only about halfway through the Nomu army when All Might decided to show his face, hopping in through the doors saying, "I am here," before looking down at a frown at all of the villains. He had not been given word that all of these villains had been attacking UA, as one of them had possibly been intercepting the connection. As one thing that Shigaraki forgot to mention was that they also had a bunch of thugs throughout the different zones. Not only was the Nomu army there, was there a bunch of thugs attacking his classmates. So with All Might there, Shigaraki would then smile. "Meet your end, All Might. This is the last thing you'll see before you die. All of your students will be rotting in a bonfire once I'm done with them." As All Might, not liking this at all, would jump towards Shigaraki and would punch Shigaraki square in the face, causing for Shigaraki's jaw to completely just crunch under how powerful All Might's punch was. Shigaraki would try to manage a scream out in pain, but wasn't able to, as his jaw was completely off, just hanging on by its hinges. As Kurogiri, noticing this, would make a warp under Shigaraki, warping them back to the hideout so that he could get further healing, leaving the Nomu army to sit there. However, before he could do anything else, Shigaraki had ordered them to kill All Might, and once that's done, to kill the rest of the brats and anyone standing in their way. So the Nomu army now having a target, they would all rush towards All Might, completely neglecting Izuku, rushing towards the shiny golden hero. All Might would easily be able to punch through them with ease, as their resistant quirk had done nothing to compensate with the sheer power of All Might's punches, easily tearing through all of the Nomus. However, after a couple of these punches, All Might would start to get tired. As smoke would start to emit off of All Might, Izuku would end up realizing that All Might wasn't going to be able to take down this horde alone. Izuku would jump in, telling All Might that he's got some help now, as he was sorry that he neglected to do anything to help fight this army. Izuku would jump towards all of them, tearing through many of them with one clean just swipe of his axe, as Izuku would then jump back, putting a finger in the air, as a massive sun orb would appear out of nowhere, as many of the people around it would just think the sun had just appeared inside of the USJ, as the Nomus would end up seeing this shearing heat emitting off of the sun. Izuku would flick it down towards the Nomus, completely consuming everything beneath of it, disintegrating all of the bodies of the Nomus, as Izuku had just failed to leave a single body left. The Nomu horde was completely destroyed. Izuku, then realizing what he had done, would then say, "Dang it, why didn't I save one of their bodies? You all could have used it for research or something. That possibly would have been a smarter option," Zuko would say, face-palming before getting a pat on the back by All Might. "You did good, kid. At least you saved your classmates. You shouldn't worry about that now. You should be worrying about the safety of others and along with your class. So just you help me save them. I'll get this half and you get the other, alright?" Izuku would nod his head before jumping off at extreme speeds, basically copying All Might's super jump that he had done to get to the other side. With Izuku doing that, he would get to the other side, completely helping his class, destroying many of the thugs around them that they had not helped to destroy themselves. With Izuku going zone by zone, he would end up gathering up his classmates, as they would then meet in the last zone with All Might, as their class was then saved. As police cars would end up rolling up thanks to All Might telling Kaminari to contact the police would then rush in along with ambulances and everyone else to help the students out if they were injured. However, they would then see just a pile of villains surrounding in the other areas, as they would see the middle just look completely decimated, like a meteor had just struck the middle of the USJ. One of the police officers would walk up to All Might before asking what had happened. All Might would then say that it had been attacked by villains, and they were unsure how. The police officer would write it down before telling some of his fellow officers, before asking around if anyone had gotten hurt or anything. Now, once all of that had been done, they would all be taken back to UA, where Nezu would then formally apologize for that small inconvenience about the villains, and he was thankful that none of them were hurt. As he would then announce, for the safety of their just staff and you all, that he would please like you all to keep this whole thing under wraps for now, so that your parents don't pull you out of UA. Because if they found out that you had been attacked by villains, they might get scared or shocked and pull you out of the school, and that would simply just ruin your career or your future career as a hero. Many of them would agree with this, as Nezu would then also make another announcement. "So I'll be making something for you all, as I'm building dorms so you all can stay here on campus. You could also probably get some extra training from the staff that will also be hopefully moving in on campus here too. However, they all don't have to do this." Many of the class would nod their heads, excited that they're going to be around the rest of their class and many of their best friends for the next couple of years, while they would also be kind of sad they're probably going to be leaving their parents behind. However, Nezu would then tell them they still have to get their parents' permission, of course. A week later, Nezu would have all of their parents' permission, as all of them were now moving in to the dormitories, as all of them would be sitting on the couch after moving in, wondering what they could be doing. Nezu had set aside a week after the USJ incident so they could get to know each other. He also told them that they'll have 3 weeks to get used to the dorms, while they're also updating all of the security measures, just so they needed to be training as well, because if they're not training in those 3 weeks, they'll possibly be moved down to the general studies, or maybe even class 1B. So with all of them sitting there wondering what to do, Izuku would then have a bright idea. "How about a bet? Because I think that'd actually be quite fun. I bet $100 that none of you can lift this axe," as Izuku would then drop it down to the ground, as many of them would see Izuku's axe sitting there, wondering how they would not be able to pick up an axe. It would just be silly. So, one by one, many of them would end up agreeing. So Izuku would then laugh. "You all are about to lose so much money. I'd also even bet that All Might couldn't even lift this axe." However, someone ended up hearing that as a window was open right behind the couch. All Might just happened to be strolling by and ended up hearing this. So, deciding it would be good fun, he would end up walking in before saying, I heard my name. Do you mind explaining what it could be? As Izuku in the class would then see that, before Izuku would then say, oh, I just simply said, I don't even think you could lift my axe up. All Might would then laugh, saying, oh, sure, I'd take a bet for that. Izuku would then laugh, knowing that he's about to win a bet against All Might, something that he could possibly brag about to his parents when he ended up getting a chance. So one by one, as his classmates failed to lift the axe, struggling at trying to lift it up, they just couldn't. When Bakugo would go up, he would scream trying to lift it up, but it simply wouldn't be the case, which would end up getting some actual just thoughts that maybe Izuku wasn't a weakling after all, having just had being able to lift up this axe so easily, and now he couldn't. It also made Bakugo quite angry. So as All Might would then step up after the entire class had done it, he would actually start to get quite nervous. So when he would power up to 100% trying to lift up the axe, he couldn't at all, as he would start to struggle before laughing. I guess I can't lift this axe after all. Why don't you mind showing us, Izuku, how easy it is? With one hand, Izuku would wrap his hand around the handle before lifting it straight up. See, it's not that hard, actually. As Izuku would then hand it over to All Might, as he would grab it with two hands before it would then fall down to the ground. I guess we're not giving you enough credit for wielding this thing. Guess it is quite heavy after all. Izuku would then laugh, just saying, yeah, I guess so. Izuku, I actually have to speak with you about something, All Might would end up saying. Okay then, Izuku would ask. Please, come with me. It shouldn't be said around all of these people. Izuku would nod his head, kind of getting stranged out by what All Might could possibly want, as Izuku would then walk off with All Might. As they would then circle around the dorms, All Might would then ask Izuku a question. Thanks to your help at the USJ, I actually was able to keep my form long enough to get out of there. Izuku would question what All Might was saying before he would then turn into just a skeleton. Izuku would be shocked. Wait, you're not the real All Might. You're an imposter. Now, All Might would then just say, no, this is actually me. Lifting up his shirt, he would then show Izuku his injury. A couple years back, I got an injury fighting All for One, and so I've just been like this ever since. As Izuku would nod his head before asking what All Might wanted to tell him. Well, thanks to your help at the USJ, we were able to save everyone a lot faster, limiting the amount of people who got injured, and also limiting the injuries. So seeing that you really want to become a hero and save as many people as possible, I would actually like you to become my successor. Izuku would say, what? Your successor? All Might would then go into detail explaining how he can pass down his quirk, and how his quirk had been passed down to him, and for generations beyond that. Izuku, seeing an even further chance to get even more power, would accept All Might's offer. All Might would pluck a hair out of his head before giving it down to Izuku. So, Izuku, in order to gain my power, you have to eat this. As Izuku would be kind of weirded out by it before just saying okay, swallowing it, as All Might would then say, alright, I'll see you later, Izuku, it's getting quite late. Now, the reason I'm giving Izuku one for all is because he just is quite weak in the night, and I don't want this to be exploited. Sure, there's going to be villains far stronger than Izuku is at the night, and so with one for all, Izuku's easily going to be able to counter this instead of just being a frail person like some random quirkless kid he could possibly pick up off the street. And so Izuku, if he was the number one hero, he couldn't just be swatted backwards if he was on a night mission. So that's basically why I want to give Izuku one for all, just in case he ends up getting into a ton of night stuff where he's not going to be able to basically he's not going to be able to be as strong as he could be. and especially so if he was facing off against quite strong opponents where he would end up having to use his power. However, it was nighttime and he just couldn't. So that is basically a brief explanation and is why I'm giving him one for all, but it's not going to be too important. As Izuku would end up seeing the setting sun, as the moon would then arise, Izuku would then start to fall backwards. His axe had started to topple him over as Izuku wasn't able to lift it much longer. Izuku would then crawl back as he would look down to see his axe sitting directly on the ground, as Izuku would then sigh. He wasn't going to be able to pick it up until the morning, as he was far too weak to wield it until then. Izuku would then walk off to go to bed, wondering what the next couple of weeks had in store for him here at his new home of UA. And that is where I'm going to leave this What If off, everyone. I hope you all did enjoy part 3 of What If Deku Had Sunshine. I really hope you all did enjoy the series, and yeah, I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.